Good morning. My name is Joel Towers. I'm the president of the New School, and it's my pleasure to welcome you here today to this very important conversation on building economic security, New York's response to escalating unaffordability. We're gathered here today to focus on the economic precarity experienced by a majority of New Yorkers and identify the opportunities for local government to better meet these needs. This event comes at a pivotal moment with a new mayoral administration on the horizon and affordability at the forefront of New Yorkers' lives. The forum is co-hosted by the New School's Center for New York City Affairs, which is celebrating its 60th year this year. We can applaud for that, by the way. And the Institute on Race, Power, and Political Economy at the New School, and the National True Cost of Living Coalition, co-chaired by the Federation of Protestant Welfare Agencies and Community Service Society that go by FPWA and CSS. The event builds on recent research from FPWA and the Urban Institute on the true costs of economic stability, and research from the Center for New York City Affairs and the Institute for Race, Power, and Political Economy on rising inequality and the racial wealth gap. With deep optimism for what the next mayoral administration can do to promote affordability and economic stability, this discussion includes leaders from government, the academy, and nonprofit advocacy groups to highlight the policy implications and solutions to support economic security for all. Our goal is to frame economic security as the North Star in policymaking for the next mayoral administration by expanding the focus beyond poverty and affordability alone. It is now my pleasure to introduce Jennifer Jones Austin and Derek Hamilton. Their dialogue will provide framing for the day and will then be followed by a panel discussion. So let me just give brief bios, not that any of you in the room need them, but for the purposes of both respect and honor. Jennifer Jones Austin is a fourth-generation leader of faith and social justice. As CEO of the Federation of Protestant Welfare Agencies, an anti-poverty policy and advocacy organization with 170 member agencies and faith partners, she has led and secured monumental changes in social policy to strengthen and empower the disenfranchised and marginalized. Jennifer brings to her work a profound understanding of the link between race, poverty, law, and social policy in America, and to the role that religion plays in all of it. Derek Hamilton is a university professor here at the New School and the Henry Cohen Professor of Economics and Urban Policy. He is also the founding director of the Institute for Race, Power, and Political Economy at the New School. Derek is considered one of the nation's foremost scholars, economists, and public intellectuals. Derek has been involved in crafting policy proposals such as baby bonds and a federal job guarantee, which have garnered a great deal of media attention and served as inspirations for legislative proposals at the federal, state, and local levels. He's also not only a long-standing member of this faculty, but a dear friend. Jennifer and Derek have shared the stage before, some of you may have seen this, as co-chairs of the city's Racial Justice Commission and the work that they were able to achieve. That work led to a ballot initiative that changed the city's charter and committed the city to the active pursuit of justice and equity, the establishment of an independent office within the government to ameliorate discrimination and harm and improve how city government serves communities, and a requirement that the city measure the true cost of living. The true cost of living and thriving in New York is the subject of today's gathering. So Jennifer will kick us off, and then she'll be joined by Derek in a fireside chat. We will not actually have a fire. We've had those at the university. I don't want any more. And so please join me now in welcoming Jennifer to the podium.
I did not know that President Towers is a hugger, very much like me. So I'm appreciative. I love that. I love that. Well, those who know me know that I'm a hugger, so we're in good company and we are fast friends. Good to see all of you. Glad that you're here with us this morning. He said that we don't have a fire, but if you know me and you know Derek Hamilton, we bring the fire. And so we're going to have a little bit of fire today. I want to thank you all for joining us this morning for what I believe is a very timely, and President Tower, as he said, is a very timely, critically important series or set of conversations to be had. We're centering this morning on building economic security, New York's response to escalating unaffordability. So I want to thank President Tower for inviting us, welcoming us into this space, and I think we all know well, we appreciate that this is an institution that has recognized the nation over and beyond for essentially being that center, that epicenter where we are centering on interdisciplinary approaches to the problems that plague us as a city and as a society, and engaging in critical discourse on the issues that are facing us, making sure that we have not just scholars at the table, but we have people with lived experience at the table, helping us to lean in and plot a pathway forward. I want to thank, as we get started, our co-hosts for this gathering. As President Tower stated, the Center for New York City Affairs, and it is led by Kristen Morse, who I've had the pleasure of now knowing and working with. I don't want to put a date on this, but it's been a while. We actually worked together to establish, under Mayor Bloomberg, the Center for Economic Opportunity, going back, goodness, I guess now nearly 20 years. And then our other co-host in this, the Institute on Race, Power, and Political Economy here at the New School, led by Derek Hamilton, who's become a very good friend. And of course, a partner of FPWA's, the Community Service Society, which has been a champion for communities that have been marginalized and underserved for decades here in this city. So, I want to talk to you a little bit, setting the stage for why we're here. Some of you may know something that I just recently learned, that we are in the auditorium, and I am standing on the stage on which Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. passionately spoke in February 1964, calling for the passage of the Civil Rights Act. I went back with the help of staff and I reviewed that speech. And as I reviewed it, I was struck by how many of his words rang true then and still ring true today. In his speech, Dr. King noted that the economic problems of Black workers, confined by legal discrimination and exclusion from education to the bottom rung of employment, were worsened by the emergence and growth of automation. Today, we are again confronting new technologies that will, and actually it's now being documented, are disrupting employment for so many. And we do not yet have policies that center people, ensuring that technological advancements benefit workers rather than replacing them. As with most disruptions, those with the least ability to bear the hardship will have the greatest burden. But these days, more and more people are struggling. Not just the least of these, if you will, not just the lowest income, not just those who've long been left behind, but more and more people are struggling under the weight of economic insecurity. People who may be getting by, but they aren't getting ahead. In that speech that Dr. King gave, he made clear that true freedom required more than physical freedom. It also required economic freedom. Little known fact, although it should be known, is so much of Dr. King's legacy has been centered in the fight for civil rights. But if you lean back and you go back before 1964 and the passage of the Civil Rights Act, if you look at the March on Washington, what often is left out is that it was the March on Washington for jobs and freedom. He was centered in economic justice and economic rights. But if you spend a little time with me, you'll come to appreciate that the reason we don't talk about him being centered in economic rights is that part of the problem that we have is using narrative that doesn't have a center on economic freedom, but just more on, do we all get to go eat at the same restaurants? Do we get to stay in the same hotels? Because there is intentionality in not centering on economic freedom and economic security. So we're here right now in this city, and I'm looking at Brad Lander, who has helped us to get to where we are today. We're in a moment of transition, significant transition, as we all hopefully participated, but at a minimum, we saw last week more than 2 million New Yorkers going to the polls, the largest number of people since the 1960s. And of the 2 million, over 1 million, more than 50%, voted for Mayor-elect Zohran Mamdani. First in many ways, right? The first Muslim, and some people would say the first person to identify as a Democrat socialist, but some of you who know your history, that there was David Dinkins, who also aligned himself with Democrat socialism. And just a little history lesson here too. Martin Luther King Jr. centered on democratic socialism. So this is not just a new phenomenon. When we look at those who came out, what we appreciate is that there was an energy that attended the vote. People were charged up, they were fired up. And why? Why were they coming out? It appears that a majority were saying that this city is too unaffordable and for far too many people. That they were demanding a city in which you can start your adulthood, raise a family, and age comfortably. That they are demanding affordability, and in it, that they be seen. That we not just look at affordability through the eyes, although it's critically important, of those who have the least income, but those who are considered to be middle income, working, making wages at what we call 400% of poverty. They're demanding to be seen too. So, what we're going to do in today's conversation is center on the majority of New Yorkers, those who may be classified as living at poverty or below poverty, those who are above poverty but still struggling, those who do not have, here in New York City, economic security. Simply put, they don't have the resources necessary to meet their everyday expenses, pay down debt, and save for emergencies and for the future. Now, while these struggles cross every demographic, every family type, every borough, the burden of economic insecurity is felt hardest. It falls hardest on individuals and families who have long been locked out of economic opportunity. The individuals, the families, the communities who were at the center and focus of Dr. King's fight for economic justice more than 60 years ago. So over the next couple of hours, you're going to hear from brilliant New Yorkers who are deeply engaged in building a New York City, a city that works for everyone. We're going to explore the role of government in helping ensure economic security and policies that would make this city work for everybody. We're here today, not just those from whom you'll be hearing, but all of us, every single one of us. I'm counting you all. We're all here to meet this moment, to create a New York City that works for all of us, and to ensure that no one is left behind. So let's begin by casting this vision, by centering ourselves in something more than affordability, by centering ourselves in economic security. I'm going to be joined on stage now by the founding director of the Institute on Race, Power, and Political Economy. Derek Hamilton, join me on the stage, please. someone who I have, I don't know if I'm on, just give me a moment. I sometimes tell people that I am the daughter, the daughter, granddaughter, and great-granddaughter of Baptist preachers. So that means I have volume, when I read it, right? Let's see though, let me see if I can get this going.
I think it's right on the top right here. Voila. Did I hit it?
This is why he's my partner in all things. All right, we good to go? All right. So President Tower told you a little bit about Derek Hamilton, shared with you that he's the university professor and the Henry Cohen Professor of Economics and Urban Policy, founding director of the Institute on Race, Power, and Political Economy here at the New School, chief economist for the AFL-CIO, and something that he and I both are proud of, a fellow Brooklynite, right? And
I think we can be even more specific. Bed-Stuy.
there you go. There you go. I think they're no longer calling it do or die, but right? A lot has changed. A lot has changed. And as I guess I may have intimated by saying that I've hugged him several times, he is my brother. He is my comrade. He is my friend. And our friendship is based in a joined-up fight for what is right for all New Yorkers, and especially those who've been made vulnerable.
Yeah.
So,
Well, it's an honor to be here, without a doubt. The term love comes in mind in reference to King, in reference to you. King talks about love in three forms. There's the agape love, a love just for humanity, for brotherhood. Jennifer is a leader. Jennifer, I've had the pleasure to see her in her leadership role, managing very diverse voices on important commissions like the Racial Justice Commission, herding us together in such a way where it wasn't an easy job with all these different opinions and everything. But even before we start the conversation, in this time of doom and gloom, if we're looking for rays of hope, New York City is a strong ray of hope. If we go back and look at those ballot initiatives not so long ago, within the last 5 years, and how they passed overwhelmingly, the city committing to, in this day and age when DEIA is under attack, the very presence of people from various backgrounds, this city affirmed those values of inclusion. This city affirmed not just the values of inclusion, accountability, that the city needs to be held accountable to whether or not they're achieving the values of inclusion and justice. And then before I get off my soapbox, let me add the third element for which Jennifer championed, a true cost of living. So in this day and age of authenticity, because I think we're in the period of authenticity. I think if we look at Mondami's election, hell, if we look at Donald Trump's election, whether we like it or not, he's pretty authentic. We are in the age of authenticity, and a true cost of living metric, I think, fits with that age. It's not enough to think about some poverty threshold that originated in the 50s, but rather in a place like New York City, where we know New York is not the same as other parts of the country, to really ground data in some authentic indicator of what it means to be able to not just live, but thrive in a city like New York was a critical ingredient that I'm glad we had included.
we did that work together, and I think that's a very good place for us to begin, because when we worked together on the Racial Justice Commission, one of the things that we first set out to do was to establish for the city's charter a preamble, to cast a vision of what New York, what people living and residing here in New York should be able to expect when they live here, and expect from their government. What government is responsible for doing to help ensure that people have a good quality of life, and the opportunities that attend some should not just attend just those some, but all. And so if you recall, people were looking at us saying, why do you need a preamble? And we looked at the chart and we were like, but there's nothing guiding the city, nothing setting the bar. And so we put a bar in place, the preamble, to actually elevate our thinking about what New York should be for everyone. And then we came up with some specific charter revision proposals. And one of them was to establish a true cost of living. centered in opportunity and people living with dignity. Now, as Mayor-elect Mamdani ran, he centered a lot on affordability. And I just kept thinking to myself, Derek, like how we were ahead, right? And many New Yorkers were ahead. We were, all of us, talking about affordability long before a mayoral candidate came along and was talking about, affordability. If you go back to, maybe it was 2009, there was a mayoral candidate who was saying, the rent's too damn high. Remember? So people had long been talking about affordability, but we weren't necessarily seeing mayoral candidates respond by just calling it out. And what we determined as the Racial Justice Commission commissioners was that one of the ways that you center government on the issues of struggling New Yorkers is by naming the problem with data. And that's what caused us to put the true cost of living on the ballot. Just by way of background, some of you may or may not know that in America, the measure that is used to determine how Americans are faring is the official poverty measure. It is a measure that was established, I believe, in 1969, that essentially looks at the cost of food, multiplies it by 3, and it looks at the average national cost, multiplies it by 3, and then uses that to determine what New York and what Americans need to actually get by. And it's a number that's used across the nation, whether you live in Brooklyn, New York, or you live in Wichita, Kansas, or you live in Omaha, Nebraska. And this measure says that for a family of 4, 2 adults, 2 children, you need just $32,150 to not be poor. And then what it does is it sets eligibility for critical income supports like SNAP, like Medicaid, using this measure. Well, you all, by a show of hands, who here, family of 4, or just one individual, could live in New York City just on $32,150? Right. We determined that we needed a more accurate and more comprehensive measure. And so we put a true cost of living on the ballot. And then New Yorkers responded. 81% of the electorate, or those who voted, determined that we needed the measure. I remember sitting on this stage and it becoming readily apparent in the days leading up to that, that election cycle that it wasn't just a white issue, a black issue. It wasn't just a Democrat issue, a Republican issue. There was a gentleman who stood here who didn't fit the racial justice buckets. And he was like, I don't like all those other measures you put on the ballot, but that true cost of living, now that's a game changer. And it was. And when the measure passed by that rate, that overwhelming majority, we realized we were onto something. And we realized when, looking at Trump, that, when he was talking about affordability, there was something there. He was speaking to the problems that plague Americans. And so we leaned in and we said, we should have a national true cost of living. We joined with the Community Service Society, Derek continuing to work with us at FPWA, and we then commissioned the Urban Institute to develop the first ever in the nation true cost of economic security. Now, we shifted the name from true cost of living to true cost of economic security, appreciating that if we did not begin to shift the framework to center on what people need, not just to get by and to get ahead, but to actually stay ahead, we might see people continually pulling us back to kind of just enough policy, right? Oh, let's just raise the wages by just enough. Or, you know what, well, if we, and look, I believe in child care and I believe in making sure everybody can afford child care. But people saying, well, if we just add another few $1,000s to child care, we've done something. That doesn't necessarily mean people who have significant resource gaps are actually faring better and they're now able to plan for their future if you just give them just enough child care. So we established with the Urban Institute, and again partnering with the Community Service Society, the true cost of economic security. We now have the first ever national measure of true cost of economic security. And the blessing in it is that unlike the official poverty measure, which does a national average of food, this actually goes county by county and looks at the data around costs. Costs for housing, childcare, transportation, let's see, what are the other costs? Healthcare. It looks at incidental medical costs. It looks at the costs of savings. So you can weather an emergency. You can pay down debt. And then it looks at the resources that people have, including income, assets, and income supports to meet those costs. What it tells us is that 52% of Americans do not have economic security. It tells us, when we look at New York City county level data, that 62% of New Yorkers, 62% of New Yorkers are not economically secure. Poverty measures would tell you that we're only dealing with about 10%. 62% of New Yorkers are not economically secure. They do not have enough to get ahead and stay ahead. It also tells us that when we look at family types, when we look at families in New York City, that number grows to 72% of all families. But if you look in the Bronx, we're talking about 88% of families not being economically secure. It tells us that single-parent households struggle at 91% here in New York City. It tells us that the resource gap for families is about $53,000. What does that mean? If you actually pay for childcare, people are still going to have a gap. So what we need to do is center on what that is and why that is. And I want you, Derek, to help us appreciate economic stratification and how that feeds into what this is and why that is.
And I'm going to go back a little bit. And yesterday I was on a panel and someone referenced, to achieve justice, you need poets and you need plumbers. And I think that metaphor fits in with metrics and values. You know, I'm going to give a few slogans. We measure what we value, and we value what we measure. So that's, you need both vision and you need policy. You need paradigm and you need political economy. So for true cost of living, if we're not capturing what it is that we value, if we're not measuring it, we will be limited. And likewise, if we don't have the vision to describe what is the purpose before we go out and collect data, we will be limited. So another thing we did with the Racial Justice Commission is that we required the city to put out metrics on how well they are doing with regards to racial inclusion. So Jennifer began with the values, the preamble. That's not just trivial. That is substantive for the city to say with clarity what we value. And you know, why do we want inclusion? Well, first off, it's simply the right thing to do. But secondarily, from an analytical standpoint, it is different experiences, it is different cultural affinity by which I believe you get new and fresh ideas. Without those different perspectives, the status quo simply prevails. So there's a analytical value to it, but at the outset, it's simply the right thing to do. So again, it's not enough to say we want inclusion. We need to go out and test and evaluate inclusion. So I got asked the question about stratification. Another thing that I think is useful for us to understand in our ideas around understanding an economy, again, not only understanding the purpose of an economy, we are naive, we are myopic if we don't understand that it's an intersection of identity, politics, and economics that helps define our political economy. I bet it's not novel if I were to say in this audience that politics and economics are related, or that gender and economics are related, or that race and politics are related. But it's the intersection of all three that I think we need to advance to. It's an understanding that the ways in which we determine public policy is in part grounded in who we think is deserving and undeserving. Another commission in which we serve on is a commission looking at the question of reparations for New York State. Thinking about reparations has a critical component of truth and reconciliation. That truth and reconciliation is critical, in my view, of doing public policy going forward. A lot of the approaches to policies that we have today are that of trying to incentivize defective behavior along people who aren't doing well in order to do better, to end up with a better outcome. In other words, we ground our paradigm in which we live today is an understanding that poverty and inequality is grounded in some deficit behavior or some deficit attitude. If only black people would study harder. If only women worked harder. If only this group did more, they could change their lot in life, and this land of milk and honey would provide opportunity for them. That's the nomenclature. That is the current paradigm, that the market is a sanctioning tool to reward good behavior and sanction bad behavior. Well, that's the story. It might be grounded in some data, but there's also a great deal of data to refute it. We know of countless stories of hardworking individuals. We know of countless stories of people who have PhDs even, who do not end up with an outcome that's commiserate with economic dignity and security. Another story, which I also believe is grounded in data, is one of investment, one of understanding that poverty and inequality is rooted in resource deprivation. Frankly, it seems pretty obvious to me, the reason why people are poor, they don't have enough money. Mm-hmm. If they had more money, they wouldn't be poor, that's right? That's meant to be tongue-in-cheek, and obviously there's more nuance. But under a different type of paradigm, under an understanding that if we invest in people, we enhance their capabilities that not only facilitate them to be self-determining, but it allows them to be self-determining in ways that generate macroeconomic multipliers that benefit us all. In other words, I believe that our most treasured resource in society is people. Mm-hmm. And if we invest in people under the right conditions, this is a model, this is a theory, this is a framework, this is a vision, that's going to generate not only what the purpose of an economy is, which, by the way, why don't we define the purpose to begin with? Firms are tools to serve us. The purpose is our salvation. The purpose is our ingenuity, our innovation. So I'm going to tie this all together to just say that we see reparations, and right away, we understand it as a policy aimed specifically for black people. And let me not be deceptive. Indeed, it is the most parsimonious approach by which we can rectify the past in a moral, just way to account for the years of deprivation with regards to capital, which leads to wealth, which I think we'll talk about. Mm-hmm. But in addition, that truth and reconciliation, that authentic understanding of how we got here, impacts the way we do public policy going forward. We understand that inequality and poverty is grounded in resource deprivation, and when the state invests in its people, all people, in an inclusive way, that is not only the just thing to do, but it also is reducing of poverty, inequality, and promoting our collective well-being.
So I've been listening to and learning from Derek Hamilton for many years now. And what I'm always trying to do is figure out, how do I take his knowledge, his great knowledge and wisdom, and like break it down for myself and kind of like make it plain. You talked about the interplay of politics and economy and economics. And what I'm always appreciating is that since the founding of this nation, let me even go back before that. The taking of land from Native Americans was grounded in, politics and economy. And those who wanting to have more, having more, and essentially starving and leaving out those who actually had. You go to the enslavement of African people. It was to build wealth at using unpaid labor, right? And I'm not saying that, and we're not calling them unpaid workers. They were enslaved persons, but essentially it was building wealth by using the labor of others and not paying them for their worth. And this is what continues. When I make it plain, I talk about it in terms of structural economic deprivation. When I began chairing the Racial Justice Commission, I had a conversation with Bishop Desmond Tutu's general counsel, who said to me, We talked for about 3 hours, and to paraphrase his words, he said, Jennifer, you have to be ever reminded as you do this racial justice work that those who created the system created it to persist. Those who created the system created it to persist. And so when you think about our policies and our centering, a lot of it is tied to structural economic deprivation. How do you uphold through laws, policies, practices, those things that will serve to ensure that those who do not have will not have, and those who do have will continue to have and have more. So you do it through various policies, various norms. You actually do it through narrative that says those who do not have are undeserving. And so you uphold a system that allows for that. And what we tried to do with the true cost of living is to begin to push at that. As I said, the official poverty measure does not talk about resources by way of assets. When we talk about how people are faring in America, we talk about income and low income. We don't talk about low wealth. But as Derek Hamilton has taught us from a lot of work that he has done, wealth is the game changer. Wealth and the ability to grow more wealth is the game changer. Can you help us to appreciate the significance of wealth when we're talking about economic security and the inability to actually attain it?
And I'm going to offer a slight amendment and say economic security and economic agency.
Yes.
Right? That capability.
That's a friendly amendment.
Yep. If we were to summarize an economic indicator that facilitates agency, the ability to do things, right? We'll go back, I say purpose a lot. Isn't that what this is all about? The ability to define a purpose and have the resources, the wherewithal to try to achieve that purpose. Isn't that one of the essence and meanings of life? If I'm defining freedom, that's one way I'm conceiving of it. Mm-hmm. And if we're looking at economic indicators to facilitate that, and by the way, there is no silver bullet, but if we're finding a metric, it's wealth. We think about wealth as an outcome, but its essence is an input, the ability to do things. If you're going to make a decision to send your child to an elite school, it's often financed out of wealth. If I were to quit my job and pursue a different passion, it's not going to be income to finance that. That's going to be wealth.
But wait, let me just interject here real quickly and say, and those who finance their children's educations to go to those elite schools also know that being in those spaces will help to generate even more wealth.
Yeah.
Through the networks and the opportunities. It's not necessarily the education, but the networks alone are going to, what do they say? You don't go to Harvard Business School because the education's better. You go there because the network's better.
Yeah. Well, wealth begets more wealth. The nature of capital often is that of consolidation, iteration, and then here's another word, exclusion. Mm-hmm. But power comes in many dimensions. And in this conversation, we should be thinking about power, paradigm, and political economy. So there's public power and there's private power. We have the capabilities of going to the ballot box and implementing programs like I'm a champion of reparations and a champion of baby bonds. Yes. And that's one mechanism by which we can ensure that capital becomes more democratized, that everybody gets a birthright to capital so that wealth, and we know how wealth is generated, mm-hmm. right? Of course, there's financial literacy, financial coaching. Of course, there's being hardworking and all that other stuff. But the reality is that without capital, all the financial literacy in the world is pretty limited. And I might even say perhaps even cruel to have the knowledge to know how to build wealth. But if you don't have that critical ingredient of capital, then you're locked out. Inequality is locked in. It's intergenerational. As Jennifer pointed out, it's often a down payment help from a parent or some other individual that facilitates the difference between a homeowner and a renter.
Yeah.
So, just to sum it up, this again ties into the conception of the ways in which I think we need to think about society. People are critical ingenious agents that need to be invested in. Capital is one way, health is another way, right? You should not be vulnerable at the point of being sick to the constraints of finance, the stigma, the wherewithal of trying to finance at that point for something as dire as whether or not you get to see a doctor. So one way to think about all this is not simply as costs by which a municipality is intending to manage. And I'm excited, and this needs to be a conversation. Clearly, we both got a lot to say, but I'm excited that New Yorkers are standing up and demanding more from their government. They're demanding that their government invest in the most treasured resource, which is people. So thinking about something like buses, free buses, right? That's an investment. That's an investment in the mobility of New York City residents to get from A to B and do a whole lot of other things that they otherwise might not be able to do because of that cost constraint.
You know, as you talked, there are lots of thoughts. Whenever I talk with Derek, there's so many thoughts that are running through my mind. And then it's funny, I also had heard that nursery rhyme as you were talking about, you know, like trying to build wealth. Do you all remember it was something like little so-and-so sitting on a fence, try to make $1 out of 15 cents. She missed like this. That is like kind of the false narrative that attends, that if we just have a little, well, why can't we just work a little harder and make it more? With this new mayor or incoming mayor, one of the things, and I keep looking at Comptroller Lander, he knows me well. Every time he talks about affordability and I have an opportunity to talk with him being the mayor-elect, I'm like, yeah, and the response is not just enough. It's economic security. And it's investing in people in ways that are actually going to promote economic security. Not just saying we checked the child care box and now we're done. You've done, as you talked about, you've put baby bonds in place. You've worked to do that here in New York City. And the nation is responding and looking as well. Not necessarily the Trump administration, but people lean in. When you talk, people listen. If you were seated with the mayor-elect, what advice would you give in this moment about how to think about the policies that he will be sitting with, or the opportunities? I want you to essentially have the last word and help us think about how should we be talking with this mayor as he won on, quote, affordability, as some would have us think that affordability is just enough. How do we center the mayor in economic security with policies?
You know, first off, the mayor's campaign was pretty brilliant, pretty genius. So with humility, I certainly wouldn't give political advice on how to articulate policies. I guess I would back out, and you know, I'm driven by, right now I'm obsessed with power, paradigm, and political economy. And that's jargon, and I can break it down. But I'm obsessed with power, paradigm, political economy, power, paradigm, purpose. So far too often, and he's good at it, he's such a great articulator of vision. Far too often, we just presume a vision, a status quo that's been given to us. One of the biggest problems of my field of economics is the ways in which we present the world as some scientific endeavor devoid of values and norms. So first and foremost, I would encourage the mayor to keep telling New Yorkers, you actually get to choose. You actually get to define and choose the society you want and what gets valued. You get to make that choice. So we begin with the purpose of an economy. Then you have to build that vision. You have to, again, flip that equation. You know what we do with poor people? We manage them. We manage them as a surplus population. We engage in how do we cost contain this ledger on our budget. We socially isolate them. We incarcerate them. We stop and frisk them. We control their fertility and family formation. We go in and try to regulate the ways in which they raise children. We do all these things in a way to manage poverty. Flip that equation, invest in them. If you believe in people, How do you ensure that they have a bank account? How do you ensure that they can get from A to B without the constraint of finance when they don't have any, right? This concept of a vision of investing in people, investing in the city, is not only the point at the right. Why are we even doing all of this? But to ensure that we have human flourishing. But it also turns out to be a just, productive macro multiplier. So rather than trying to bribe capital to come into a neighborhood with all sorts of tax incentives, what if we were to invest in the people in the neighborhood to begin with? I think that'd be a good way to fight gentrification. I think that'd be a good way to develop a neighborhood from the bottom up. So I'm rambling on. We need a summary. So I guess I would say that in this moment, choose justice, say it with authenticity, and then also build that power, because having the values without power is sentimental and anemic. If we go back and quote Martin Luther King, who graced this stage right here, and frankly leaves us vulnerable to others who use power without any type of love or value and become reckless and abusive. So ground some vision, some values with power in order to facilitate investments in New Yorkers so that we can be that thriving city where we always lead.
I love that, and love. And I'll wrap us by saying, you know, since we keep on evoking the name of Dr. King, we have to remember that at the time of his death, he was leading the Poor People's Campaign. And what he had come to appreciate was that this was not just a black issue, that there were many people in America who were struggling, white, black, people of Hispanic origin, and other, and that maybe the way that we would finally seek resolution and overcome the management of poverty was by seeing that this is not an othering thing, and we should not be pitting ourselves against each other. What heartens me in this moment is that when we talk about insecurity in New York City, it is poor people, and it's people who are classified according to the current official poverty measure standard as low and middle income. And so this is, in many ways, an all of us issue. And if we all can, be seen and respected for our value and worth, we all have an opportunity to thrive.
2 quick points, if
Please.
I can. Because I see my president there, so I'm in the new school. I got to invoke Marx to some extent. And I'll say tongue in cheek, why was Karl Marx wrong in my view? Why is it that the proletariat might not eventually take over capital? I don't think he had a lens on race. The ways in which power can concentrate at the top and exclude is through relative status. To find a dominant political group and in an immoral way, offer them relative status over someone else.
That's right.
Look over here while we do this. That's the mechanism.
Right.
So
it's the tool, and like more plainly said, it's the tool and the distracting mechanism, right? It's the way that immigrants have been used over the course of the last several years, right? They're the reason that you're struggling. They're the reason you're suffering. The way that the attack on DEI, it's the black people are not staying in their black jobs. They're taking your jobs.
Yeah. So the nut to crack is a new form of solidarity. A solidarity that's not reduced to class interests.
That's right.
A solidarity grounded in identity where we invoke 2 things. One, you get to choose your identity. It is inhumane for any individual to not be able to associate to the group that they find affinity towards and to recognize that history and that value of that group. And frankly, asking somebody to give it up resorts to the dominant identity prevailing. There is no non-identity. And the second thing is it's also immoral for that identity to have psychological or material transactional value. And King, in his evolution, the final point, he understood that it wasn't just integration or political rights that was going to get us to salvation. By the twilight of his life, he understood that freedom was grounded, that choice was an illusion if you were hungry. That choice was an illusion if you were unhoused. By the end of his career, King got to the point that economic rights was an essential ingredient in any system you were going to have in order for us to have freedom?
When I sit with Derek Hamilton, the little church girl in me goes to church and she goes to school. It's always an absolute honor, a privilege to hear from you, to learn from you. And I'm looking at President Howard, I'm thinking, I may have to come back to school here at the new school and sit in his class.
We could use the tuition dollars.
Thank you, Dr. Hamilton. I appreciate it. So, we're going to have a panel now of experts, city government leaders, organizers, researchers, practitioners, and they're going to help us think about how we move economic security forward in practice here in New York City. The conversation is going to be moderated by Holly Pretsky, and she is the city editor at City and State, and she leads coverage for City and State for City Hall and for the City Council.
All right, hi everyone. My name is Holly Pretsky. I'm city editor at City and State New York. I'm so happy to be moderating this discussion on economic security at a crucial time in our city to make an impact. As we just heard from that really stimulating fireside chat with Jennifer Jones-Austin and Dr. Hamilton, we've heard a message loud and clear from New Yorkers in the past few months that affordability is really a primary concern for them. The victory of Zohran Mamdani, which we keep calling over and over again stunning, his stunning victory in the primary, showed us that, and then his decisive victory in the general election confirmed it, that this is really top of mind for New Yorkers. And as Dr. Hamilton said, it's not just because of politics, it's not just a political issue. There are real forces that are bringing this to the forefront. Private sector real wages in New York City dropped, as they did in the rest of the country in 2020. But unlike the rest of the country, they still haven't recovered to pre-pandemic levels. And a report from the Center for New York City Affairs found that New York City is the only city in the US to have seen significant real median household income fall between 2019 and 2024. So we'll get into some of the sobering data on the affordability crisis we're in. But we're also in this time of real flux and excitement, this time of transition where we have a new mayoral administration coming in. There's this sense in the city that people who previously weren't at the table might get a seat at the table. There's a lot of jockeying. The whole power structure of the city is changing, and that feels really exciting. I think a little stressful for the political class of the city, but it makes this a really exciting time, especially for people like me who cover politics. So we have a really smart panel up here that's going to dig into some of these issues. Joining me are Lauren Melodia, an economist with the Center for New York City Affairs, Aaliyah Guillory-Nickens, campaign organizer with Youth Represent, Joanne Grell, a housing advocate with Community Action for Safe Apartments, Mark Federman, a former East Side Community School principal, Joyce McMillan, executive director of Just Making a Change for Families, and of course, New York City Comptroller Brad Lander. So let's give them a round of applause. And I'll be moderating, but I really appreciate audience questions. I think the audience often comes up with the most insightful and smartest questions during the panel, so I really encourage you all to participate in that way. If you want to ask a question, you can raise your hand now, and one of the event coordinators will give you a piece of paper and a pen that you can write it down on, and then partway through the panel, I'll call for the event coordinators to come collect those questions and then bring them up to me. And we're, again, really relying on the audience to have input here because I think that this is a room full of really smart people who are following these issues closely. And so I'm definitely curious about your input, and I think the panelists would say the same. So we'll start out just by going down the panel, introducing everyone and kind of getting a sense of your careers and your work. So Lauren, we'll start with you. You study how childcare costs impact the economy. That's a really hot topic in New York City at the moment with Zohran Mamdani promising universal childcare. So tell us a bit about your research and your current role. I think so, yeah.
Can you guys hear me, or does this need to be closer? Okay, great. Thank you so much. So we have heard a lot about how much childcare costs, how unaffordable it is to parents. This impacts parents' ability to go to work, and also, when childcare costs so much, it takes away income that could go towards other really important basic needs for families. But the reason that childcare costs so much is because it's a labor-intensive industry, and that's actually a good thing. Licensed childcare programs are required to have one staff person for every 2 to 3 infants. And in fact, the people that work in this sector are some of the lowest paid people in the economy. So, sorry to say this, but it should actually be more expensive. But it shouldn't be the burden of individual families, because childcare is a long-term investment for our society. It's a public good. And so we shouldn't be asking young parents to pay the full upfront cost. And this is why we need to really build a universal childcare system at this, critical juncture. So my research focuses on the people who work in the field, the people that run small businesses out of their homes, we call them family childcare providers, as well as the nonprofit centers that provide childcare. And these programs serve families that pay 100% out of pocket. They serve families that are income eligible to get a voucher from the city to subsidize the cost of childcare. And they also run the majority of the 3K and pre-K programs in the city. And there's a few things from my research that are important in thinking about how we build a truly universal program. The first thing is that the existing sector is extremely fragile because parents can't afford the cost of childcare, and because of how those vouchers and 3K contracts are designed, businesses are struggling to bring in enough revenue to cover their costs. This means that they offer low wages, there's high staff turnover, which really compromises quality. I mean, at this stage in a child's life, you really want to be bonding long-term with a provider or an educator. We can't have a revolving door of staff in this sector. And so programs either don't have enough revenue to keep all of their classrooms open, and we've seen actually a lot of centers and family child care programs close in recent years. And for family child care providers, we see business closures, but we also see the business owners making poverty wages. So a report that our center is going to be putting out in the next week or so draws on a survey of 450 family child care providers in New York City that we did with many community-based organizations who are here today. And shout out to Audrey Jenkins, who took all that survey data. She's a PhD student here at the New School in the back. She took all that data and gave us some stuff to work with here. And so I want to paint kind of a picture of who these people are. Now, 90% of them are women of color. But your typical family child care provider is a 47-year-old Hispanic woman. She wasn't born in the United States, but she's lived here for over 20 years. She's been running her program out of her home for 10 years. She has 2 children of her own. They're school-aged, they're not little ones. And depending on how many children she has enrolled in her program, on a good day, she's making $18 an hour. And on a bad day, when she doesn't have enough children in her program, she's making as little as $6 an hour. And you might wonder, how can someone make $6 an hour? We have a minimum wage of $16.50 here in the city. Well, she's a small business owner. She's an independent contractor. She doesn't have an employment contract that guarantees she makes a minimum wage. But the other thing about painting this picture, this difference between $6 versus $18, is that we find in our research that these programs are actually severely under-enrolled. A lot of the existing childcare programs in the city are they have about half of their seats filled. And for family childcare, this includes those who have a contract with the New York City Public Schools to offer 3K. And so a lot of the conversation about how do we build universal childcare, we're talking about we need to build more centers. We actually don't need more physical infrastructure. We need to stabilize the people that make this a reality. And I think what it demonstrates is that we don't have like a supply constraint. We have a broken market, right? Providers can't ask parents to pay more because parents can't afford it. So we're kind of stuck with low wages in this sector. And it means that people aren't accessing those seats if they don't have one of those vouchers, if they don't specifically need 3K. And this is why we really need the government to kind of step in and pay for the full upfront cost for all families. There's a bunch of other stuff that we found in this work that we've done over the past 2 years surveying providers. We did a bunch of focus groups in 3 languages recently to kind of identify how do we roll out universal childcare in a way that centers and stabilizes this workforce. And I'd be happy to talk more about that later, but I'll leave it at that for now.
Yeah, thanks so much. We were talking about this in the green room, but it's just such an exciting time to be studying the economics of childcare. I'm sure your expertise will be much in demand. We'll go over to Aaliyah now. A lot of your work focuses on mobilizing young people, particularly around criminal justice issues. So tell us how you became an organizer and why young people need to be at the table in these conversations.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Aaliyah. I work at Youth Represent, which is a nonprofit legal organization that provides free legal services to young people up to the age of 26. So they also have a policy team that focuses on legislation that would help young people in court, and I work on their policy team as a campaign organizer. Before joining Youth Represent, I was actually a participant of one of their programs that they had called the Youth Speakers Institute. So like a testimony of how programs actually transform young people's lives. I was fighting a case and I had to be in a program to make sure that I wasn't remanded, and Youth Speakers Institute was that program where it focused on basically training young people who have been system impacted on how to advocate for themselves in the legal system. So it was a 6 to 8 week program. I finished it, graduated, and I stayed involved at Youth Represent. At the time, this was like 2018, they were working on Raise the Age and protecting Raise the Age after it was passed. And it was something that I was interested in because Raise the Age helped me keep my case in family court at the time, and I was 16 years old. So I would just volunteer my time. This wasn't anything that was court mandated anymore, but it was something that I was passionate about because I seen in real time how it affected me and how it helped me and my peers. So I would just volunteer to do things. I would stay involved, and then they opened up the position for a campaign organizer, looking for someone who had that experience and that firsthand impact, and I joined as their campaign organizer. I was fortunate enough to get the position, and from there, my main goal when joining was making sure that there were other young people that are being affected by these issues that we're talking about, making sure that they're part of shaping their campaign. So right now, we're currently working on a campaign called the Youth Justice and Opportunities Act, which would protect young people in the system, their YO status, which is youthful offender. It'll give them more opportunities to programs, it will cap their sentences, and give them a second chance at life, because right now, you can only, as it is in the current law, you can only make one mistake as a young person, and we understand that as a young person, you're gonna make multiple mistakes. Everybody that was young at a time or youth at a time made multiple mistakes before they got to where they're at, and they didn't become an adult when they were 18 or 21. We know that like brain science proves that your brain doesn't fully develop until 26, so we're pushing laws and legislation that reflects that and protects young people in the legal system. And that's the work that I've been doing for the past 3 years at YR. I started a youth committee of 13 to 20 young people that have been impacted by any system, whether that's the legal system, the child welfare system, when it comes to the public school system, even gang involvement. Those are the young people that I center in this work, because those are the young people that are directly connected to the issues that we sit here and talk about at these events and these panels. So that's the work that I've been doing with them. And I would say that young people, it's important for young people to be at these tables when having these discussions, because we're talking about their futures most of the time, especially right now when we're looking at a time that's affecting us heavily, and we weren't prepared for a lot of the tribulations that we're facing because we haven't been part of these conversations. A lot of the times, young people are siloed from these conversations because they may be seen as not prepared or they don't know enough, but now we're living in a time where it's directly affecting us. Everything that's happening is affecting us right now, and we're underprepared because we weren't prepared for these conversations, and we weren't included at these tables and these conversations to talk about solutions and things that are directly affecting us. Being that they're directly affecting us, we're closest to the problem, so we have the closest solution to the issue, which is why it's important for us to be at these tables, and the solutions that we produce will speak for other young people. Adults can't speak for young people because, number one, they're not young anymore, and most of the time, there's a disconnect between these communities and the groups of youth that hang out together. We're closest to them because these are our friend groups, these are our peers, so we have a lot of the answers. Even if our peers aren't at the table, we hang out with them, we chill with them, so we get their perspective, so we could bring it. Like, that's a lot of what I do. I hang out with a lot of my friends that go through the same issues as me and a lot of other young people, and being that they're not in these rooms, I use my voice to speak for the issues that we all face. So that's why I would say that it's important for us to have young people at the table, and also preparing them to be leaders in these spaces as people transition out, making sure that there's like a bridge and a segue for more young people to be leaders in these spaces when talking about these issues.
Thank you so much. Really well put. I think Another thing that this recent election cycle showed was the power of young people. When you can mobilize them, when they get involved, they can really make a huge impact. We'll go over to Joanne, who's focused on tenant advocacy. So tell us about your work at CASA.
Well, thank you so much, Aaliyah. It was so nice to hear you talk about youth from the youth perspective. I love that. And it really hurt me when you said that old people are not young anymore. That really hurt my feelings, but no, but I love it. I love hearing what you have to say. It's beautiful. So hi, everyone. I'm Joanne Grell. I'm a tenant advocate, and I'm very honored to be here today with the National True Cost of Living Coalition and with this amazing panel. I bring greetings from the Bronx, which is the 88% share below the TCES. And I am one of the 62% of people in New York City that can't afford the basic necessities, so hi. So we can't talk about economic security without talking about housing security, because housing stability is economic stability, right? And I want to share my story, which is about housing stability. It's actually a success story, I'm happy to say. I was a single mom with 2 children in 2002, divorced from my husband with a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old. I found an apartment on Craigslist, which, you know, Craigslist is no longer around, so I found an apartment on Craigslist, and 23 years later, I have raised both children, both of which have graduated from college, one who is in medical school, and one who has a film that just premiered at Sundance. So, thank you, thank you. Not bad for an old person, that's right. And so I say that only because that is what housing stability and affordable rent was able to do for my family. It allowed my children to dream bigger than I could have ever dreamed for them. And that's why it's important to me to fight for affordable rent and to fight for affordable housing and stability and dignity, because when you don't have a place to lay your head or a place to call home, everything is affected, including your health, your mental health, and everything in between. You can lose your family, you can lose your job, so many things. So why do we have this housing crisis? Contrary to what some politicians want you to believe, New York City does not have a lack of housing units. It has a lack of housing units that people can actually afford. I believe that I heard somewhere that today a family of 4 to live in New York has to make over $153,000. That's a lot of money, okay? And especially if you are an immigrant, especially if you are a marginalized community member, you know, so many different factors play into whether or not you can earn $153,000, right? So for decades, the developers have put, well, our politicians, not Brad, of course, but our politicians have put, because he's a champion for tenants, and in the past has been so, they put profit ahead of people by giving tax incentives to developers, by upzoning without affordability. 2019, before the HSTPA, which is the Housing Stability Tenant Protection Act, before that, a lot of apartments, thousands, were deregulated from rent stabilization. How many people here have a rent stabilized apartment? Yes, love you. Hold on to that. Hold on to that apartment. It is what I consider today generational wealth to have a rent stabilized apartment. Rents here rise faster than our wages, and apartments are treated like investments rather than a human right, which I believe that they are. And what we have now is a city where working class families are being pushed out of places that we love, that we grew up in, that we helped build. And like they were talking earlier, you know, we tell our children to go to college, we tell our children, you know, to get a good education, that's gonna get you out of the cycle of poverty. But then they come back with student debt and cannot afford to live in these apartments where they have grown up for generations. So we need to really do something, right? And it becomes impossible for people to save for retirement, for emergencies, for dental bills, for childcare, as we were talking about. And so we become people that live in survival mode. We're just trying to get by and we're just trying to survive, which definitely has an effect on our mental status. Now, my work at CASA, Community Action for Safe Apartments in the Bronx, is incredible, and I love it so much because we empower people, everyday people, to know their rights, to fight for their rights, to become leaders in their communities, and to ultimately join a coalition that will help change policies in Albany and wherever necessary, right? And so CASA this year collected 4,000 signatures for the Freeze the Rent campaign. And we, as part of the Housing Justice for All coalition, as a coalition, collected over 20,000 signatures. And if we're gonna talk about data, we learned that 70% of New York City residents are tenants. So they said, well, if we get tenants to vote, which we typically don't do because there's usually nothing to vote for, there's no one that speaks our language, then we could really decide the outcome of this election. And so that got us fired up. All our members were fired up. They were out there collecting signatures. I'm talking older women would go to colleges. They would go to Orchard Beach, okay? They went everywhere they could to collect these signatures so that we could elect a rent-freeze mayor, which happened to be Zoran Mamdani, which we're very happy and very hopeful that he will fulfill the promises that he has made, right? But if he doesn't, we'll be right there beside him to nudge him and say, hey. But we think that he's going to be a champion for tenants. Yeah, and that's it.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's interesting to hear you say you'll be right there nudging him. Like part of he expanded, he had this broad coalition of groups and of people who are so passionate about him, and the kind of flip side of that is that then you have all this huge coalition that's also holding you accountable, that's going to be following up with you. I'm just curious, you mentioned that your housing stability enabled you to raise these amazing, successful kids. Do they live in New York City? Do they have apartments?
My son, yes, he lives with his dad because his dad has a huge house with a pool in Long Island, but he definitely comes twice a week to visit his mom and stay with me in the apartment that he grew up in. And my daughter is in medical school in Los Angeles at USC, Keck School of Medicine, but she'll be back.
Amazing. Okay, Mark, over to you. Mark is a former school principal and brings a perspective on supporting low-income students.
Okay. Hi, so I just retired after 25 years as a, it's great, retired, but as the principal of East Side Community School, a 6th through 12th grade school in the Lower East Side, not too far from here. Very interesting thing about our school is that it's, we're from Manhattan, but it's a school that's 2/3 students and families who are eligible for Title I services and Title I funding, but it's 1/3 of students who are middle class and even some upper middle class. The majority of those 2/3 are students that are Latinx and African American, with some Asian students and white students, and then the middle class and upper middle class tend to be more white students, but there's a mix of different races in there. I tell my families and my kids pretty much every day and remind my staff, it is very hard to be a kid. I don't think there's anybody in here that would be like, hey, let me go back and try that middle school thing out for a while, right? Like that really fit me well. Like that was my best time, and even like the early high school years, right? It's just not an easy time for all the reasons we know. And it's really hard to be a parent. It's really hard to be a parent. Anyone who's a parent here knows that. Add that, to be a kid and a parent in New York City, it's awesome, because New York City is awesome, but it's extra hard for all the reasons I think we know. And then when we think about like just the community that I've served and worked with for years, the difference, it's already, whoever you are, but to be a kid or a parent in New York City when you are living in poverty or economic insecurity, and that 66% is measured by Title I, probably 75, 80% of our families are living, which is why this economic insecurity, security measure is so important, are living in, worried about their day-to-day economic security plus their future, and talk about wealth. We could talk about education is such a huge part of getting education is so important, right? But then, as Joanne just talked about, so many kids that will graduate, right, who don't have family wealth, like you have a better chance of collecting wealth, but you go back into a cycle often if you don't have the combination of the education, and the education can help you build the wealth. So there's a lot of connections there. But having worked with and witnessed for 25 years, the difference on a day-to-day basis okay? You can offer what I think we offered a really good school. Kids get in there by lottery, but it's a really good school and give an opportunity to all different students of all different levels. Dr. Hamilton used the term, he talked about a lot about reparations, and we like to use the term, instead of using there's an achievement gap, which kind of blames the communities for, who have lower, often it's test scores, but, other academic, we use the term academic debt, right? We owe an academic debt. There are community members in our school, the majority of them, that come there victims of the academic debt because of economics and racism and the way the world, unfortunately, continues to work. So there's so much, we all have so much that we could share within the few minutes to introduce those, but the day-to-day experience of a student who is facing racism, facing poverty, living in it with, most importantly, economic insecurity, is just so different what they need. Regardless of the school, you have great teachers, but the attention that they need, so it's really important just within individual schools, but as a school system that we really look at that and recognize the day-to-day needs. I'm gonna list very quickly, anybody who knows me will say I'm speaking slow, but this is actually, I just can throw about much stuff out. I'm gonna just throw a few things out there that I think are really important. You can ask the questions you need to ask. It's really important that schools, individual schools, and the system can help with this, but this is an individual school, develop systems where there is an adult, small classes are awesome, there's a lot of movement towards that, which is great, but where there's an adult in that building, and I'm talking middle and high school now, but in all buildings, that knows those students. So you have an advisory system or a crew system where there's one adult to every 10 kids. That adult communicates with the parent, with the kid, because in order to be supported, in order to learn and taken care of, students need to be seen, especially students who are struggling economically and aren't usually historically seen. So having that one adult in the building, so we need to just think about ways we structure that. There's a lot of models out there, but it's not citywide. We need to think about food. So many of our kids are coming to school hungry. So you have the breakfast programs, but do the kids get in time for the breakfast, right? There's kids are struggling with transportation. They're dropping off 2 or 3 kids. Do they get in time for the breakfast? If they don't get in time to get their breakfast, is lunch at 1 o'clock or 12 o'clock, and are some kids going out to lunch and then some kids have to eat? So can we think about cafeterias being open all morning, where at any point, any kid can ask to go to a class? Schools can create that in the offices, in the counselor's offices, but can that be a system-wide program where food is available before lunch, and after school? We have the infrastructure already. It's just a couple more steps, but it's very doable, and it changes everything. I am a little hungry now because I've changed my lifestyle since I retired, and I'm eating later breakfasts, and I'm not as good right now because I'm hungry. And I'm sure a lot of you guys, your partners or your kids will tell you, you suck when you're hungry, right? You are not your best self. So it is really important. It's huge that kids are eating throughout the day and that everybody gets access to snacks when they need it and that they don't have to, so that's really important. We need counselors. Counselors. Mental health is huge, and we need counselors, and we need partnerships, and we need a minimum amount of counselors in each school, and we need the funding, and we need partnerships with clinics. It would be great if we had more health clinics, especially, we can't do it in every school, but a lot of kids miss school because they have to go to the doctor. A lot of kids miss doctor appointments because they can't find them, and if families could bring their kids to school, to health clinics for their checkups, for the dentist, inside buildings or connected to buildings or partnerships, they could get access mental health care, they could access physical health care for all the kids, and it would also get parents sometimes who are hesitant because they don't feel comfortable coming to the school. It would get them into the building where we want them, so it just can kind of kill a bunch of birds, and so the city there's work, we can do that. We need to just protect DEI work. Boom, speak back to Trump, speak back to everybody. We're doing that already. We need to do that. Anti-racism, protecting our LGBTQ students, our immigrant students, crucial, and we're doing that, but we need to do that. Career and internship. We talk a lot about being college ready. We need to make sure that kids are career ready. It would be great if every school had a work-based learning coordinator, or we have SYEP programs. Could we have FYEP, fall youth employment programs, WIB, winter youth employment? For certain students, could we create youth employment programs throughout the year or paid internships? A lot of students have to choose between working a job after school or working an internship that might get them more job access. We also need students, and again, in the fireside chat, we heard a lot about just building wealth. Can we make, with SYP, with internships, can we make part of that just not learning financial literacy, because financial literacy is an insult to people who don't have the finances to be literate about? Can we have a small percentage of money, and it might be similar to the baby bonds, but where students that are working in these programs, that 5%, they don't have to do it, 5%, 10% goes into, I have a TD, I was able to retire, I came from nothing financially. my family has no money. I was able to retire because some teacher my first day told me to put money in my TD. I'd never had a stock, I'd never bought. Put 10% of your check, 5%. It allowed me to retire and take care of my family at a level I've never had wealth. I now have a little bit, and it's nice. Can we take that? Can we put a small percentage in kids' bank accounts for all kids, for all families, and teach them how to financially use it, have them watch and see the power of investment, give them the money, invest? Is that so? There's a path that we can do that. A small investment and a big return. We need to affordable housing. Kids can't, if you can't live in affordable housing, if you can't be, if you can't have a proper home life, you can't. Then we need to keep working on that. We need to just make sure restorative justice programs. So much more we can talk about. I'll leave, and we just need to think about authentic ways of, this is connected to work-based learning, authentic ways of learning. Not every kid learns the right way, the same way. There shouldn't be one right way to learn, one right way to test. How can school, especially as the world changes, right? We started talking about AI, we talked about as the world changes, as job changes, how can schools be creative and we're not answering to just one god of a single test score or a single, exam, or, what are the graduation requirements that will actually allow students to get the authentic skills that will change and be flexible so they can walk out of there with jobs. Can they get an OSHA certification, a food handling certification? Can they get, computer tech as well as get jobs, that they can take that work while they go to college, or they can take the skills to college. But this idea of, that everybody has one path, we just have to continue to stay creative. I'm going to be quiet and pass it to one of my favorite people in the world. Okay, sorry.
Before you do, I thought it was so interesting before when you were talking about, you were a principal for 25 years, right?
Yeah.
And that was
30 plus years, but it's principal 25 years, yes.
And that was a record-breaking tenure?
Yes.
And I'm just curious, you mentioned so many of these extra supports for the students, but it also seems like the staff turnover is a factor here, and I'm curious if you have anything else to add about how you lasted so long, so much longer than so many other principals, and what you think about turnover for.
Yeah. And I would say in my 3-hour, which is probably 6 hours for anybody else talking, I would say we could talk about school, but one of the things we had very low turnover in our school, and certainly the same way I talked about individuals knowing your families, right? You need to take care of every family. You need to have systems that work for everybody, but individual, I think both as a school leader, really thinking about all the individuals in your school who are the adults, and really treating adults as individuals and as professionals and seeing them as people, which make them want to work harder for you. You can't take care of kids if you can't be taken care of. So I think as a system, and certainly within each school, the more school leaders take care of their staff members, it allows them to then, show the level, that transfer that empathy and love over to their kids and their families. And then I would say the same thing, it'd be great if, principals got treated that way, and superintendent, it can keep going. But I think that was huge. And I think just the idea of being, and surrounding yourself with a community, investing in a community and seeing it as a community that works together, definitely allowed me to stick around, a lot longer.
Okay, and over to Joyce McMillan. Joyce, you're focused on the child welfare system, which you actually call the family policing system, and how that intersects with poverty and family separation. So tell us about your work.
Good afternoon, everyone. Ooh, let's move that back. First, I'm going to tell you about that, but first I want to say this guy right here, he was my children's principal from the 6th grade to the 12th grade. And I was homeless during the years of my oldest daughter from the 6th grade to the 10th grade. 4 years. And I'm inspired. My work is inspired. But what I learned from this guy right here and how he advocated for his students and how it was just reasonable things that he asked for, and the narrative shifts, sleeping out in tents to bring awareness to his homeless population of students during the coldest weeks of the winter. He just went above and beyond. So I just want to give Mark a round of applause. My work is based on my family's experience. Being involved with many systems. I don't think there's a system that I have not been involved in. But what I realized through my experiences that all of them lead to family separation. And the two main ways to separate families is through incarceration and foster care. and both of those are for-profit businesses, even though a lot of the foster agencies are quote-unquote nonprofit, right? But the way the federal funding is distributed, it creates a profit for many, and it also incentivizes the separation and not repair or support for a family or community's needs. So as an example, maybe my older child is watching my younger child, and the younger child pulls the tea off of the table and burns herself. I would be charged with neglect. That wouldn't be seen as an accident. It's neglect, one, because she got injured, and two, because a child under 18 was watching a younger child. This is unreasonable when we don't want to provide child care. And when we talk about the cost of separation, it is an extraordinary burden on the taxpayer. Wow, how is it a burden on the taxpayer but a profit for others, right? Make it make sense. And so I just want to give you a quick parallel in how things first relate, and then I'll break it down further. So when we talk about foster children in the prison industrial complex and the parallels between the two, there should be no parallels, right? Because they should be two separate things. But we have Aaliyah on the stage who I'm sure can say being in these systems is like being treated like an adult prisoner. But the parallels between the two is they are both separated from everyone and everything they know and love and are familiar with. They both have set visit times on set visit days. They both have oversight during the visit. They both eat what they've served. They both change homes and cells regularly. They both use garbage bags or pillowcases to change locations. And for time restraints, they both utilize the same language. If a child is released from state custody or a person who's incarcerated is released from state custody, they're both paroled back to either their family or their community with oversight during that parole period and the ability to be separated for any minute infraction. Why would we utilize the blueprint of the prison industrial complex to build a system that we claim protects children when, based on the outcome, even though we keep saying it protects children, we see the outcomes where children are not protected, children are not safe, they're aging out into homelessness, all types of bad things have happened to them. I represented a female young person who was in a foster home at the age of 15 and was arrested for stealing menstrual pads out of a Rite Aid. Why is that when a foster person is being paid all of this money to care for, quote unquote, care for a child? And when we talk about protection, the only thing based on the outcomes we see children being protected from is success. But why are those parallels in place? Is it an accident or is it intentional? I say it's intentional, but we soften the language by saying there is a pipeline from foster care to prison when it is a prerequisite training. They know where these children are going to end up because they haven't educated them. And the first thing a child needs is stability, as she spoke about, and the first thing they remove is stability. And it's not just a child change homes. Every time that child change homes, they change schools, they change doctors, they change authority figures, they change the smell in the home, they change the rules of the home, they change who their quote-unquote siblings are, all while not seeing their own families. This is what we are investing in, and it would cost a fraction, less than a fraction, of what we are spending to traumatize, torment, and disenfranchise families and their communities to keep them together. Why would we separate children out of their home because mom is working 2 jobs and does not have childcare, because her housing is unstable, because the kids missed school because they lost their bus pass and there was no car fare, because she lacked food and the kid came to school and told someone they were hungry. We're investing in investigating, overseeing, and surveilling families for the purpose of creating prisons where these separated people end up, and for profit. So the despair of others have become profit, and unfortunately, if we don't really think about what's happening versus what actually needs to be done and why, we're going to stay stuck in the same position. So while I want to take my time to share with you the things I am seeking, I also think it's important for you to visualize how these children that we are utilizing mandated reporters to report on are being treated once someone comes in to protect them. Right? Is that how you want your tax dollars spent? It's not that we need a new line item. We need to decrease our spending on separation and utilize that money to support families. And since I got my applause, I'll just pass it to Brad.
Could you tell us a little bit about some of the levers that the comptroller specifically has to impact economic security and affordability in New York City?
Good morning. First, let me just say what a real honor it is to be on the panel with this set of people. I don't know about all of you, but I feel very hopeful. I mean, this is a set of people with lived experience and leadership and vision that even in what are really dark times nationally and challenging and precarious times here, I feel a lot more hopeful after listening to this panel. So give it up one more time for this really remarkable group of people. I will say, unlike Joanne, I don't really feel threatened by Alia's clarity that what we need is young people's leadership in this city. And actually, listening to Mark, it happens that I had breakfast this morning because my daughter, who just started as an investigator at Brooklyn Defender Services, is living at home because it's expensive to find housing out there, and that means she made me breakfast. So egg and cheese with sriracha mayo was very good. Thank you, Rosa. I also want to say what an honor it is to be here, to be speaking on this stage where Martin Luther King spoke about the need for economic security, civil rights, and dignity. And I always am humbled to be at the New School. As a Jewish New Yorker, one thing the New School did in the face of the rise of fascism in Germany and in Europe and the Holocaust was to make a place not only for Jewish professors and intellectuals, but quite a lot of them were able to come here and teach, get their visas, have their lives and their families saved from rising fascism, and to be in this city where Dr. King spoke and taught us about what it means to connect economic security, dignity, and civil rights, where the New School taught us what it means to provide opportunity that saves people's lives, and then what does that carry forward? What does that responsibility look like? And it's worth remembering, what the rise of fascism in Europe, I think probably you guys learned this as well, was also driven in no small part by economic insecurity, right? Like the way I learned it, in Germany, they wound up having to go to the grocery store with baskets full of cash because prices had risen so quickly. Inflation, hyperinflation, like people experienced here coming out of the pandemic, was making people's lives precarious, and that's part of what made them vulnerable to scapegoating and racism and anti-Semitism. And so that connection, which was so critical to Trump's election, speaking to working people about their anxiety in the face of economic precarity and prices they can't afford. And of course, his intention was never to solve those problems. His intention was to give them someone else to blame, to give them immigrants and trans people and Black and Latino folks. That is the authoritarian playbook. It was in Nazi Germany, and again, thinking about how the New School saved people there. And that's it right now. That is what the Trump regime is trying to do. Yesterday they made this decision to change the rules on supportive housing. And instead of investing in this model that gives people housing first and provides supportive housing to help homeless people get off the streets, they're essentially going to throw 180,000 homeless people, formerly homeless folks across the country, back onto the streets, in the name of get tough policies. Again, kind of weaponizing that sense of economic insecurity through the lens of who are we going to blame, through the lens of stereotyping and scapegoating. And we're just seeing that every day after day after day. And so the opportunity presented right here in New York City by the kinds of people on this panel and the organizing work they're doing and what's happening is what's the opposite of that? And I think the framework here for me is given to us by Heather McGhee in her book, The Sum of Us, where she really does such a good job. She calls it drained pool politics, and she looks at the places in the American South where when civil rights organizers won the integration of things like public pools, white communities closed down those pools rather than share them, immiserating everyone in the town. When you have that kind of zero-sum thinking, you wind up with everybody losing out. When you can instead create solidarity politics, like Derek was talking about, you can grow the pie. It's not zero-sum because more people are creating and more people are investing and things are growing and then there's more to share. And that is what New York City has to offer at this moment with a new mayor, with a vision of that diversity, first immigrant mayor in generations, first Muslim mayor, young people rising. That's what we have to set against Trump's zero-sum kind of politics of indignity. And again, it really is important to connect that sense of economic security to that sense of dignity that people have. And the policy platforms of Zoran's campaign are all about affordability. But of course, the campaign in so many other ways spoke to people's dignity in that walk across Manhattan, in that midnight, meeting with taxi drivers, in the election night speech. So that's our challenge. Like, that's the opportunity we have. Quickly on the tools of the controller's office, which I could go on for probably as long as Mark could talk about his school. There's a lot of ways, and I guess what I would say is everyone has a chance to use their platforms in the direction of dignity and economic security. So we manage the pension funds that are the retirement security of the teachers and firefighters and school crossing guards and social workers, probably some of you in the room, and we've looked for every opportunity to do that consistent with, again, economic security and dignity. So when Signature Bank failed and that put 35,000 units of rent-stabilized housing at risk, we used pension fund dollars to buy the mortgages on 35,000 units, every single one preserved as rent-stabilized housing, families able to stay where they are, and it's giving great returns for the retirement security of our pensioners. So Mark, your pension's in good shape, and it's invested in saving the housing of your neighbors. What could be better than that? We also looked at who's managing that money, because it won't surprise you to learn that money managers in America, 98.6% of that money is managed by firms owned by white men. And 98.6 is a fine temperature for your body, but it is not the representative diversity of this country and the wealth that's generated. So we have focused on making sure that Black and Latino and Asian and women asset managers manage more of that money. And we've grown money under management by minority and women-owned businesses by over $6 billion over the last 4 years. And a lot of those programs haven't historically gone to Black and Latino communities, but actually most of our investments have. But we saw that we were not investing with enough firms owned by women of color, and I'm pleased to say, like, these 3 big investments we're making down the stretch, one with a great woman some of you might know named Margaret Anadu, one with this great firm set up by Daphne Dufresne and Renee Griffith, and this great real estate investment company owned by Tammy Jones. Like, we've thought, how do we increase wealth in the hands of women and people of color? And those are some folks that are making a lot of money. I don't want to lie to you. Asset management is a place where fortunes are made, but the evidence is so clear that when you diversify asset management, more entrepreneurs get opportunities, more people of color get good jobs, more retirement security is created. So when Derek speaks of that wealth gap, those are some of the ways you get at it. We've used all our tools for budget analysis. We've put up all these dashboards on exactly these questions. We did the first study on the racial wealth gap in New York City, and I'm sorry to tell you, it's 15 to 1. Average white household in New York City has a median net worth of $277,000, mostly but not entirely in their home. And that's enough money to be able to send your kid to college or help give them a down payment. The median net worth of a black family in New York City is $18,000, and that's not enough to do any of those things. And so that's why, in addition to, and I think Jennifer was really right here, focusing on these core questions of affordability, because obviously if you can't pay your rent, if you can't afford your child care, if you can't afford to get on the bus, not much else matters. But our policies also have to look at narrowing that racial wealth gap. So what's making it possible for people to move toward home ownership? Maybe that's an affordable co-op first rung on the ladder, but a first step toward intergenerational wealth. What makes it possible for people to start small businesses or to begin to do savings? Mark mentioned just making sure every student has a little bank account. Well, that's now true in New York City. NYC Kids Rise has started making it so that every student gets $100 in their bank account. In Red Hook, they teamed up together in the community to make it $1,000. So what are the policies that we can do in addition to that basic platform of affordability to think about what economic security and dignity really looks like? Because those, I believe, are the things that if we do them, will help fulfill the promise of this moment. And I really do think it's not too small a thing to say that is our chart. It's like, I like to imagine it like this. Like maybe when the history books are written, they'll say that when Donald Trump started to fail was when he came for New York City in those days after they elected Zohran Mamdani as mayor. And not only did they stand up to ICE agents and defend their immigrant neighbors, but they showed the world what it looks like when kind of a panel of people like this, when a city full of immigrants and people of color invested in their neighborhoods and grew the pie together, resisted that drain pool politics and built an economy based on solidarity. That's in all of our hands, and that's the work that we get to work on right now.
All right, thank you all so much. So see, it's a really good panel, and I would really encourage you all to take the opportunity to pose them questions as well. You can, again, write those down and then hand them to an event coordinator, and they'll bring them up to me. So we've been hearing a lot about the 62% figure. 62% of individuals and families are economically insecure in this city, according to the True Cost of Economic Security report. So that's a vast majority of people are stressed about their resources here. And there are stark inequities in that economic insecurity. Between July 2019 and July 2025, the number of New York City residents receiving cash public assistance rocketed upward by 85%. And like I said earlier, New York City is the only city in the US to have seen real wages fall over that same time period, according to that report from the Center for New York City Affairs. So obviously the pandemic was a huge factor in that, just given the timing, but more specifically, I'd like to just get thoughts from you all on how we got here. Why is it that wages have fallen and that people are struggling so much in New York City while the rest of the country has been able to rebound a little bit more?
You can start.
Well, I think there's a couple of things going on. One is we've just had a really slow recovery from the pandemic, and when you have slow economic growth or no economic growth like we have right now, it's hard for people to kind of have leverage in the economy to ask for higher wages. It's hard for people to find jobs. And so right now in New York City, we just don't have enough jobs for everybody, and that's what we have to do. We have to build economic development strategies to retain businesses, to generate new businesses, to bring businesses here that can create good jobs for people. Then I think the other kind of flip side of that on this kind of income side is just that there are a lot of jobs in New York City that are really low wage. You know, I mentioned childcare providers, but the fastest growing occupation in New York City in the post-pandemic period is home health care workers, who are also incredibly low paid. And there's ways that we can use government policy to boost wages to make some of those low wage jobs, particularly in kind of care sectors, better wage jobs.
Yeah, I'll just add, so the true cost of living index, it's two factors, right? It's what do the jobs pay and what are the costs you're experiencing, and New York City faces challenges on both sides. Almost all of the job growth, actually statistically, even more than all of the job growth that we've experienced since the pandemic is in healthcare and social assistance is the category, largely those home health jobs. Many of them, paid for with Medicaid dollars, so they may well be at risk amidst Trump's Medicaid cuts. And they, as we have structured our economy, are low-paying jobs. Now, they're not low-paying jobs because they're less important than, whatever stock trading or TikTok influencing or whatever else you do. But that's how we've structured the economy, is to pay those jobs very poorly. And so when that's a part of the sector that's growing, median wages are declining. And then on the other hand, New York is an especially expensive city. We've got this economic model, which in some ways is so wonderful. You want to have a place that's so diverse, that has people from all around the country and all around the world, that has, therefore, people at different points on the income ladder. That's generative, it's beautiful, and it creates a lot of upward pressure on costs and makes it hard to keep it affordable and equal, right? If the market rent in a neighborhood is $5,000 and you've got someone in an apartment next door that's stabilized and they're paying $1,500, now you've got a tension. The landlord wants them out and wants to be able to charge the $5,000 next door. So costs are being pulled up by some of the factors in New York City. And so you put those things together, and you have this set of challenges that Holly outlines. What do you do about it? Well, you focus on costs and affordability, like the mayor-elect's agenda. You also focus on job quality and trying to make sure you're lifting people up. And we've done some great work there, thanks to legislation I sponsored in the city council. We're the first city in the country to require living wage pay for deliveristas and Uber and Lyft drivers. We did that minimum wage increase, starting with fast food workers, and gave them predictable schedules. We're going to need to keep going in that direction because the National Labor Relations Board is now functionally worthless. So what can New York City do to better protect workers and their rights to organize and collectively bargain, and keep lifting wages as we work harder also to control costs?
So I was going to say that I think that after the pandemic, being that we were all inside, I think that building, well, first I will say, and I apologize in advance because I am going to get long-winded. I forgot to say some stuff in the beginning. But I wanted to start off by saying that after the pandemic, we lost the art of organizing. And I feel like based off of hearing what everybody said, in order to get or build economic security, it starts with organizing and organizing communities and things like that. And we lost that art when the pandemic hit because we were all cooped up in the house. So we weren't outside organizing our communities. We weren't outside talking to our communities. And then when the pandemic ended and we all came back outside, it kind of took us a while to start that organizing back. And when we're talking about organizing and building economic security, these policies that we make is based off of communities and coalitions organizing to propose the policies. Or when we have things in the schools that Mark was talking about, that's basically community organizing. When you're going out your way to make sure communities and your students and your parents are good, that's all community organizing. It's not just these big things that we see afterwards. It starts off with the fundamentals, which is organizing, and then going back to the simple fundamentals that I was going to say is before we can talk about getting jobs or getting housing, it's like, I guess, learning the things that you need to learn. You can't get a job if you don't know how to prepare for an interview, or you can't get a job if you don't know how to make a resume, or you can't even get a job if you don't even have job experience. So it's like we can create as many jobs as we want, but if we're not preparing people or giving them those fundamentals to even get a job and keep a job, because people get jobs all the time and lose it, not because they don't know how to keep a job, but because they weren't prepared to have a job or look at it long term, so they lose jobs. Then we have people that are prepared for jobs, but then we have jobs that aren't hiring. So we have to look back at like what are the hindrances and what are the barriers to certain things. When we're looking at housing, in order to get a house or to get an apartment, you need pay stubs, but people don't have pay stubs because they are not working. They're making money in other ways. So how can they show up and give you pay stubs if they don't have those things? But we kind of skip over all of those things when we talk about economic security. We skip over the actual things that are happening in real time, and we focus on the things that look good, like what we see in articles or statistics or data, and we skip over the real things that are happening to real people, which is people are not prepared for these things that we are seeing. Like, people don't have the fundamentals that they need to actually be stable in these environments, and it's things that are ongoing, and it's a continuous cycle. And until we actually break down the root causes of these issues, we're going to continue to see the same things that we're seeing, because we're not addressing the root causes of what people are facing and what issues that people are coming into contact with. A lot of the times people continue to go through the same things because they aren't being met with the needs that they've been asking for, which is all tied back to the root causes of the same issues.
I could listen to her talk all day. I think I'm getting smarter just sitting next to you, Aaliyah. Oh, and by the way, I put $2 in a bank account in the 2nd grade, and I don't know what happened to it. It was the Dime Savings Bank in Brooklyn, and I don't know what happened to it. Maybe unclaimed funds. I may be able to retire too. Okay, so when it comes to the pandemic and housing, what we saw was essential workers, undocumented people out there on the streets delivering meals, doing DoorDash, doing Grubhub, doing all of that, getting sick. And really, their rent was paused, but when it came time to pay it, when the moratorium was lifted, landlords got a bailout. They got ERAP, they got all kinds of subsidies that were able to pay, but tenants have never really been able to recover from that, especially low-income tenants. And so that's what we're seeing. And then you add to that our thankfully outgoing Mayor Adams, who raised the rent 12% in 4 years. And every year for rent-stabilized apartments, every year the RGB, we organize, we have our members go to the RGB hearings, they testify about their situations, hoping that the RGB will have some consideration for tenants, and every year the RGB raised the rents for the past 4 years. And so, we tenants have not been able to recover from the pandemic and from the rent increases that came right after. And that's why Zoran's campaign about freezing the rent was huge for tenants. It was huge, it was everything. It was the first question on a lot of the debates. Do you believe in a rent freeze? And some people were slow to get on board, but eventually pretty much everybody except 2 people said that they would commit to a rent freeze if they were elected mayor. So for me, the reason why, economy has not caught up is because the rent is too damn high. It's still too damn high, and it's getting higher every day. When a South Bronx studio goes for $3,500, who can afford that? And what they're building is studios and 1-bedrooms. They're not building for families. They're not building truly affordable houses or truly affordable units. They're building, what they want to see, mixed income, where 20% is affordable and 80% is not. I mean, we have a lot of work to do, and we are doing it. We are getting ready to roll up our sleeves and organize in Albany. We're taking the Bronx to Albany, so get ready.
This may be unpopular, but it is my grassroots thought. The economy is not just made up of numbers and line items. The economy is made up of people, right? And we talk about people not having jobs and low-paying jobs, but we have done everything to undermine the human experience with robots. I can't go into the store now and find a cashier to check me out. That role of the cashier used to be a retired person's supplemental income. It used to be a young person's after-school income. It used to be a person's pocket money while they were in college. All of this money is being removed from the economy as we continue to say we are making things easier. People have no patience. I grew up having to put shit in the oven. Everybody doing things the microwave way now. Everything is being done so quick that we are not utilizing humanity, the human experience, has to be in everything we do. We cannot snatch children out of homes without thinking about their connection to their family, which is humanity. We cannot incarcerate people, mistreat them, charge them an exorbitant amount of money to reach out and say hello to a family member or continue to be a parent to an underage child. There's no humanity in that. Feeding a neighbor, providing childcare, being a part of a community is all humanity. And this economy that we keep talking about does not have any humanity. There's no human element. And until we get real about what we're moving away from and what it is causing, the iPhone, ITV, I, until it becomes us, then we will all be on our own and won't have no support of other people. We need support of each other to change things from how they are to how we see they need to be. And that means caring about somebody else, having empathy, not feeling sorry for them, but having empathy in knowing they didn't create their situation. Most of these situations are created through systemic injustices. And that is why there is a specific group of people who are often impacted by it. And so for the narrative, I just have to give a quick story. This is really important to me because I speak at a lot of colleges. Probably the only college I haven't spoken at is Yale. So if there's anyone affiliated with Yale, please invite me. No. But I'm at a college, and this is a pretty white school, and I'm pretty much talking about the same things we're talking about today, right? Because it's always the same thing. It's just you verbalize it differently each time. And so this particular day, this young white man in the audience, when it was time to take questions, stood up and said, you know, I'm really tired of black people blaming us for their woes. Because I had mentioned systemic injustices, right? I didn't even talk about white people, specifically like calling out white people. And I was kind of taken back, and he went in, he was like, it is not our fault that you guys don't want to read books, that you want to be baby mamas. And he went through all the negative narratives, and I was in complete freaking shock, right? And the class is looking at me, the whole audience is looking like, wow, what are you gonna say now? And really, I didn't know what I was gonna say. I had to take a breath. And I said, can someone tell me what a landmark is? And the class, everyone started laughing. Like, first she was talking all of this stuff and she was speaking with confidence, and now he confronts her about this and she's asking what a landmark is. And I was like, please, entertain me. So someone shared with me that a landmark was a building somewhere between 100 and 150 years old that had certain protections not to change the infrastructure and other things about the building. And I'm like, correct. And I'm like, so he's saying all these things like we don't want to read a book and all these other negative narratives about people of color or black people specifically, when guess who those landmarks were built by? Guess who didn't have a degree? Guess who hadn't read a book? Guess whose buildings are still standing? This is not about black people not wanting to work hard or be able to pull themselves up by our bootstraps. They've taken the boots. And so we can't feed into it being okay to not include humanity, because humanity means a certain group of people who don't want to do crap with their lives, and we're not just giving them things that they won't work for. That's not what it is. We have to pay attention to what's really happening and why people are in the situation they're in, include humanity, because humanity is not for one group of people, it's for all.
I'm so glad you mentioned a negative audience experience. We've had the opposite here. We have amazing audience questions.
Yeah.
Thank you all so much for contributing these. I also want to say I'm moved by the kind of through line that Aaliyah mentioned, that Joyce mentioned, the kind of idea that the pandemic had this impact on organizing, that people, like, that networks themselves, interpersonal connection, displaced by technology, that interpersonal connection, things like unions, things like churches, things like these civic groups have such a role in economic security. And I feel like I'm hearing that kind of in different ways from different angles from all of you. We had prepared a lot of questions, but these ones are better. So I'm going to start with this one. Good day. I'm just going to read this one. Good day. My name is Erwin Grant, and I'm a justice-impacted man from Brooklyn. My question to the panel is this. For individuals like myself who have paid our debt to society, completed our education, and continue striving to better ourselves, why do we still face significant barriers to employment? Specifically, why is the Justice Center for the Protection of People with Special Needs recommending that potential employers not hire us, even in cases where our past offenses do not legally or ethically bar us from the positions we apply for? How can individuals like me overcome these barriers, secure fair opportunities, and obtain jobs that provide truly livable wages? I know fellow mayoral candidate Zellner Myrie worked really hard on the Clean Slate Act to try and address some of this, but I'm curious if any of you have thoughts about transitioning justice-impacted people back into the workforce.
To the first part as to like why is that the case, I think the why, well, I don't really think there's a why because it's happening how it's supposed to happen. I believe when people are incarcerated, it's not meant to rehabilitate them or put them back in a society better than they left. It's meant to do exactly what it's doing based off of your question, which is to hinder them and not stabilize them and have them struggling more so they could enter back into the system or whatever the case may be. And I think moving forward, like how do you adjust, how do you accumulate to what's going on right now is to number one, I think the mental part is the most important. Like, of course, we sit up here talking about jobs and how to get money and housing and stuff like that, but until we actually heal our mental and focus on our mental first, then all of those other things will come. I think because we're facing like such a big monster that's bigger than all of us individually is something that was placed here before a lot of us, well, before I was here, it was placed here to hinder us. The system was made to make sure that we won't succeed. It was made to make sure that we continue to stay in this cycle of poverty and harm and trauma and things like that. So it's never going to change. Like, it's never going to act in a way we want it to act because that's not why it was made. So we can't expect a system that was made to make us stuck be the same system to elevate us. So I think it starts within. So it starts with healing ourselves. Educating ourselves is the first part. So knowing your rights in terms of employment, there's certain things that employers cannot do if a case or if a charge that you had has nothing to do, because they have to run, some have to run background checks. But if the charge doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the work that you are doing, part of knowing your rights as an employee is knowing that those background checks, some of them are illegal. And sometimes when they deny you or they don't approve you, it is actually illegal. And when you know your rights, you can advocate for yourself so you can enter these spaces. And then the second part is getting a community of people that are also educated and are also doing this work. Because one thing I learned since being involved in organizations is that a lot of us face the same things, but because we went through them, we know how to navigate them. So when you're in space and in community with other people that face the same things as you, they can help you navigate it and they can help you get through it so you don't feel like you have to get through it alone and you have to figure it out alone. And then the third part, I would say, I had it in my head, but I forgot. I'm getting old. Like, I just turned 23 2 days ago, so I had it in my head. I had it
Better
in my
watch
head,
out for those young people coming up behind you.
But I forgot. But I think I got most of my point across.
I'm definitely catching some of that old wisdom from you, so I appreciate that. Specifically, I mean, it's such an important big question. I think specifically thinking about schools and, you know, the role of education, I think it's really important. There is a movement in New York City and in parts of the nation and around more restorative justice in schools and really stopping, you know, we've talked about it for a while, but stopping, you know, the school to prison pipeline. And I think the more we, in individual schools and as a school system, push and support and provide PD and just even rules and regulations around restorative justice over suspension, over cruel punishment, you know, to young people, the more we model that for a greater society, right? If a generation of young people grow up understanding why restorative justice in a school, by developing empathy, talking things out, seeing a counselor, making amends, you know, all the things that are good restorative justice or peer mediation programs, then hopefully we start to have a city the future employers, the future, we could, the future citizens diversity will be more open to, recognizing it's, the impact of any form of injustice, of extreme, justice put on people. So I think any chance we can get in schools, we need to continue to support that work. And even if you have kids in schools or if you work in schools, to just really ask about the restorative justice work and to make that happen. I think as parents too, I think it's with our kids, right? I think we have to, we hold them accountable, but we need to talk to them about the importance of really empathizing, with other people and recognizing that we make, you talked eloquently about, every young person does something stupid. Every person does, every grown-up does something stupid. Like the idea that we would just punish people for it without any sort of, conversation or empathy or understanding that we've all been there is just, we just need to do better about that in schools, and hopefully that will continue to grow.
So those rights Aliyah mentioned come from organizing work that people did to make them the law. The Fair Chance Act in New York City, sponsored by Jumaane Williams when he was in the city council, that we organized together, a big part of what give people those rights that you can now let people know. And as Holly mentioned, State Senator Zellner Myrie led the way on this Fair Chance Act, which is a hugely far-reaching effort to make sure that people's prior criminal justice history is not a barrier to employment. And that passed, just less than, I think, a year ago. But there's a lot of work to do to make sure that people know it and have opportunities to build from it. Look, we have a criminal justice system currently that really doesn't work for almost anyone. It obviously is not working to help people get where they're going. It gives people less opportunity rather than more. But if you talk to people who have been victims of crime, they don't speak of a system that's working and helping produce anything like healing or restoration for them. I mentioned my daughter's working as a investigator at Brooklyn Defenders, and she said to me, she's quite often, she's out there talking to people about what happened in an incident. That often means talking to people who are victims of crimes or were witnesses or experienced it or family members. And what she said is look, her job is to help the clients of Brooklyn Defenders, but she's often the only one who's actually talking to victims or their families or people in the neighborhood. The system is not set up to try to help produce better outcomes. Restorative is supposed to mean, repair for harm that was done, give people better outcomes, not worse, and repair communities as well. But that's just not how we've set the system up. Now, we have this ambitious idea that was set by another organizing campaign to close Rikers Island, and that campaign has kind of gotten a little bit obscured in what its goals were. It wasn't about just buildings and where they are. It was about a campaign to look at the justice system and try to think about how it could produce better outcomes for neighborhoods, for the people that wind up in that system. So there's a real opportunity here as well. The last 4 years, basically, Eric Adams sort of said, I'm going to just pretend like that's the law, but I'm not actually working in that direction in any way. Part of the reset we have now is to bring back, not just the campaign to get to closing it, but to do it with the lens of restorative justice and some of the things that folks have said here. So I apologize. I have to run. This is an amazing panel and an amazing room to be in. So thanks to everyone on the panel. Thanks to Holly. Thanks to all of you.
All right, this one's directed at Joyce. It says, Ms. McMillan, my name is Unique Perez. I'm a college advisor at a foster care agency in Queens. I believe in the power of education for young people who end up in the family policing system. What is your advice for folks who want to engage children in the system while believing that the system is made to trap and just disenfranchise? Is it naive of me to believe that helping youth in care go to college will lead to their empowerment while being employed by the very system oppressing them? I think this is an interesting question. I think there are a lot of people who work in this system who really do care about outcomes and care about improving people's lives. And so I think that this question really gets at that tension.
It's naive. The thing is, the foster system does so much damage. Education does not heal someone from the damage they experience during the separation of their family. they're not just separated from their mom or their mom and dad, they're separated from siblings. I see twin siblings separated, from aunts and uncles, from childhood friends, from godparents and grandparents, classmates. They're unable to build a foundation. Often they lack the ability to create relationships because something inside them has grown to say, investing in a relationship is senseless because they've been shown they've been unable to maintain relationships. So getting a kid to college, woohoo, but now you can't keep a job, you can't get a job, you have all of these other mental health challenges. I say yes, it is a little green to think the end goal is to get the child to college. It doesn't start with what's at the end, it starts with the foundation of what was the reason we took that child. And I know that over 87% of children who are placed in the foster system are placed there for reasons related to poverty that is framed as neglect. It's not abuse, even though they lead with the idea around abuse. So what can we do on the front end? Isn't it cheaper to turn a parent's lights on instead of saying they're chronically having their lights turned off, so we're taking their 5 kids and splitting them up from everyone? I mean, it's reasonable, but I understand you can't legislate common sense, and common sense ain't common, but we really need to get to the root of the problem and start fixing some of the things that's happening on the front end and instead of trying to repair things that should have never happened in the first place.
All right, I think this will be our last question, believe it or not. Another amazing audience question. There are several New York State agency staff in the audience hoping to use our power as agency staff to support these economic security measures in New York City. What can we do as state staff to best support goals of economic stability for people in New York City and across the state? What arguments do you see as most resonant for the Hochul administration? There's been a lot of discussion about how Zohran Mamdani's policy ideas are really reliant on state funding and the state legislature and the governor. So this is a state agency staff member asking, what's the most strategic way to work toward those goals?
Again, staying in my lane, bigger thoughts, but staying a little, I just think a lot of the after-school funding is we rely on state, and I didn't get a chance to share that earlier, and I think the power of after-school programs, both because they provide incredible opportunities and even the playing field for so many young people, and it's also another form of childcare, productive time. It also provides a lot of older kids get to work in those after-school programs, a lot of college kids so it provides, it's after-school programs solve a lot of problems, and the investment in those programs continue to, it's a very good investment. And I think there's just a lot of, over the years, it's always, I don't want to say a battle, but it's a constant, it's a constant battle to figure out where the priorities are. And I just think you can get a lot of bang for your buck when you're investing in after-school programs.
As far as Albany goes, when it comes to housing, we are trying to reform the Rent Guidelines Board. We're trying to make it less centered on the mayor, but now that we have a nice mayor, I don't know. But we definitely wanted the city council to have more of an input into who sits on the RGB. Also, we want to change the data that they used in order to make the adjustments / increases that they do. So we're doing a lot on the state level, and also we're trying to pass TOPA, which is Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act. That has to be done on the state level. So if you are in Albany and you're able to support or to champion for these causes regarding housing up there, we appreciate it. Definitely, let's connect and tax the rich.
Can I just say one other thing about this? I think we need to kind of break down the silos between the state and the city. So much of our lives here in the city depend on state budgets, state legislation, city budgets, city legislation. They're separate beings, and they'll continue to be that way, right? We've got a state legislature, they have a budget season. We've got a city legislature, they have a budget season. But there's all this planning that we need to do together, and I think we have a new mayor who is a connector, he's a communicator, and I think that we can create some other more iterative democratic planning processes that bring everyone together. I don't know what exactly those look like. I think that the Mamdani administration can figure those out, and I think, bringing the state agencies and the state legislature into that process would allow us to actually figure out how to do universal childcare, because it is a state issue and a city issue, and that's just one of many, many examples, of things that we need everyone in the room somehow.
Can I say one more thing? Just to ground us back in community, I think when we talk about these things, they're so like it kind of sounds like a fantasy sometimes, when the whole time we're talking about like people's actually real lives. Like the answer to the question is to connect with people that are going through these issues. So it's to connect with communities, it's to connect with parents, city agencies. There's always a disconnect between communities and city agencies and communities and elected officials and communities and mayors and stuff like that. And the issue is, what we're lacking is that bridge to put us together and actually have us work side and side. It's like most of these times we talk at these panels right now, and it's a bunch of people that probably have dealt with the issues, but it's nobody, like it's no elected official besides Brad, but he left. But there's no elected officials right now in this room to hear what we're saying. It's no bridge between us, and I think that's the hinder, like that's what's in between us, and that's what's gonna help us get there. We keep on talking about these things like they're just data or it's just research, or it's just, these are people's real lives. And like Joyce said earlier, the main thing we're lacking is humanity, compassion, and community. Like we're missing these key things that should be common sense. Like this is not something that's rocket science that we gotta sit here and talk about for hours and hours and hours. What we need to do is ground ourselves back in community so we can do this work. At the end of the day, there are communities and real people that are being affected by these things, and just because you work for the city does not mean that you should be so disconnected. You should be wanting to work more with parents that have been through it, children that have been through it. When you have meetings, you should be calling up grassroots organizations. Do you have anybody at your organization that has been through this issue? Can we bring them along to hear what they got to say, having them at the table? Is there any young person that you work with that can speak to this certain issue so we could come up with solutions? But instead, we have all of these politicians and elected officials that are so disconnected from certain communities and neighborhoods. They don't know what they're talking about because the last time they lived there was 20 years ago, and they haven't been back in the hood since probably like who knows when. So it's like we have to bring back like, that sense of community and bringing people back into the conversation and stop talking about people like they're just statistics and they're just data, when it's real people's lives that are actually going through it.
And last, I would just add the problem that I run into, because I have several pieces of legislation in the state legislature, and the one that has been most important to me that I've been pushing for 5 years is Miranda for Families, which is families being told their rights when a CPS agent here in New York City, is the Administration for Children's Services, knocks on someone's door. Now, the agency pushes back, and people believe them. They say, oh my God, parents knowing their rights, children are gonna die. And everyone wants to save children. I get it, I wanna save children too. But the fact of the matter is, a parent knowing their rights, not creating new rights, not making up new rights, so the rights that already exist, they should be made aware of, because there's protocols to follow, and there's Fourth Amendment rights, there's constitutional rights, human rights, civil rights that are being violated by this agency. And the law gives the carve-out for exigent circumstances, just like with the police. The police can't not come into your home without a court order unless you offer them and invite them in, or if they hear something happening in real time. That's the only way. And that's the exact same thing for a CPS officer. But when agents came to my house 26 years ago and separated me and my family, I did not know my rights. At that point in my life, I had never been involved with a system, and I trusted that child protection agents were really only going to ensure the safety of my children, and I had nothing to hide. Well, that's not the truth. They investigate, they look for a piece of imperfection, and then they build on it, and they lie, and they expand it, and they stretch it, and they separate your family. And that has been my experience, and that's why this piece of legislation is very dear to my heart. If it's an emergency, no, they can come in. But if it's a non-emergency, you have time to go to court and get a court order. And it's important to do that because that gives a judge the opportunity to say, you don't have probable cause, I'm not going to allow you to enter this person's home, search their medicine cabinet, strip search their children, look under their bed, and all of the other things that they do that is very intrusive and invasive. We have to limit how our government interacts with families. And again, like Aaliyah said, that starts with each and every one of us. It starts with being aware and pushing your politician. Change doesn't happen unless we all agree that there's a need for change. The reason we need that change, what's happening when we don't have that change, and really push for that change. So call your local elected official and tell them that families should know their rights. You can't even buy a pair of underwear in the store without knowing the return policy, but people can come in and take your kids and you not even know how to get them back.
All right, well, thank you so much to this incredible panel, and thank you again to our audience. Let's give our audience a round of applause for these amazing questions. We heard from our outgoing comptroller, Brad Lander, during this panel. Now we'll hear from our comptroller-elect, our incoming comptroller, Mark Levine. We'll give some final thoughts, and then we will have a closing from Jennifer Jones-Austin. Thank you again so much.
Will you join me in giving another big round of applause to that incredible panel? All six were awesome. I don't know if Joanne is listening, but we're going to get her those funds retrieved from Apple Bank. Turns out that's actually the state comptroller, but we're doing a state-city coordination here. I want to shout out Brad Lander, the current comptroller, for running an incredible office these past 4 years. Give him a big round of applause. And as I'm digging into the office during the transition, I got to say, he is leaving really strong systems that I'm looking forward to being able to build off of. About this beautiful space, I have some news for you. Have you noticed a few of the chairs aren't working? So we kind of need a little bit of love here. Well, there's a very big $1 million renovation coming of this theater that I helped fund. So maybe when we come back next year, you'll have all new chairs. We hope so. It's going to preserve this beautiful Art Deco history. It's going to be lovely. I want to talk about the topic and acknowledge that while in many ways New York City's economy is booming now, the truth is there are two economies. And for people at the top, we got a booming stock market. The expensive restaurants are so full you can't get a seat. And for people who are struggling, this is a very difficult moment with an affordability crisis, with an entry-level employment crisis that is driven by out-of-control rents. I get the averages every month. Right now in Manhattan, an average rent of $5,600 per month. We got that data yesterday. This is why there were 150,000 children homeless in New York City schools last year. We have an employment crisis, which we are not talking enough about. But if you have young people in your life, or maybe you yourself are a recent college graduate, you know this. It is brutal for young people, even with good degrees, to find jobs right now. And as Brad mentioned, many of the jobs that people are finding are extremely low wage. Many of them are in healthcare and home care, and that's masking what is an even deeper employment crisis. And then we have the sector that is out there to serve people in need, the nonprofits, which so many of you are leading. And you're getting hit from all sides right now. You are not getting your contracts paid out by New York City, and that's a scandal. And you're facing blows from the evil man in the White House who was attacking funding streams for the very social service providers who are there to help people who are struggling right now. So we face a multi-front crisis here. And I just want to talk for just 2 minutes about why this Office of Comptroller is so critical to addressing these needs in ways that Brad laid out. But man, we got to build more affordable housing in New York. We need hundreds of thousands of new units, including housing that is accessible to people who are really struggling, coming out of homelessness, making minimum wage, and I'm going to use the New York City pension funds to do that. We are going to invest billions of dollars in financing affordable housing in the 5 boroughs, in all neighborhoods. I want your ideas on where and how to do that, but we have that power investing in our pension funds. How about an applause for that? This is good stuff, guys. Come on now. But we have also got to do more to protect vulnerable tenants who have an apartment now that they just need to keep. And that is going to require us strengthening our landmark right to counsel law for tenants in New York City. Is Casa still in the house? Is Hal still here? I think they were here. They might have left. But they were critical in this fight when we passed the nation's first ever right to counsel law that guarantees you an attorney if you face an eviction. But we have chronically underfunded this law. It's not being fulfilled for thousands of tenants. There are families facing eviction right now in New York City who are going through that process without an attorney. The landlord side always has an attorney, and it leads to extremely high eviction rates. This is largely a budget decision. And as comptroller, I'm going to fight for us to invest even more in tenant legal representation so that no one faces an eviction without their right to counsel being fulfilled. We can do that, and we will do that. One person applauding. I love that in the back. Thank you. Thank you. Follow their lead. You guys aren't in politics. I got to cue you. This is how we do it. This is how we do it. I mentioned the power of the pension fund. Does anyone know how much you have collectively in pension investments? Anyone know? Anyone know? $315 billion. We own a piece of every company in America. And I'm going to link up arms with treasurers and comptrollers in blue cities and blue states around America. Collectively, we have over $3.5 trillion in assets. And we're going to go to the CEOs of this country and we're going to say, we will not let you give in to the MAGA agenda because we're your shareholders. We elect your boards of directors. We demand you retain policies supporting diversity, equity, and inclusion because that is the morally right thing to do. It's also good for business. We're going to demand that you adhere to bold climate goals, that you defend worker protections, and more. We have that power. And I've already been talking to wonderful blue state treasurers and comptrollers around the country. We're going to push on this. Very quickly, 2 more very important roles that the comptroller's office has. Wage enforcement for prevailing wage is carried out by the comptroller's office. We have great laws that if you're at a job site building housing or infrastructure subsidized for the city, we demand good wages, but there are bad actor employers who are violating that law, who are cheating workers, who are often non-English speakers, who have sometimes do not have solid immigration status. The law still applies. And I want to compliment Brad Landa for really beefing up that operation. I will continue very robust labor law enforcement for those low-wage workers. And finally, how many of you actually work at nonprofits? I'm just curious. Most of you here. Every one of you is familiar with the fact that New York City has decided that some functions that the government doesn't want to do, that we contract nonprofits for. After-school programs, senior services, meal delivery, homeless services, a variety of public health functions. And then we give you contracts, you pay out your salaries and your rent and your supplies, and you sit and wait for reimbursement, sometimes for years, literally years. It is bringing the human service sector to its knees. It is a scandal. And I'm going to fight with everything I have to fix this so that people are paid ahead of time or quickly for reimbursement so that you can do your critical work to help people in need. Yes. None of these things are going to be easy. And I think it might have been Brad or one of the people up here who said this. We can't just fight in elections and walk away. We need all of you as advocates and thought leaders and experts in this arena every day to help push every one of these policies, to push us when necessary to get this difficult work done on behalf of low-income people who are struggling now in this terrible affordability crisis. Are you guys ready for this fight? Ready to keep pushing? All right, let's do this. Thank you so much. It is now my honor to introduce a woman known for her stand-up skills and her incredible advocacy on behalf of people in need in New York. Really one of the most important and precious leaders we have in New York, and a dear friend of mine. Give it up for Jennifer Jones-Austin. Thank you.
You are a blessing. He is a blessing. Mark is a blessing, and I'm excited about his leadership. He served for many years our city in very able ways, and now he's going to take on a citywide role and bring all of his heft to it, and I'm quite excited about that. We're going to let you go. I just want to thank you all for being with us this morning, now going to the afternoon, and I've been given some direction, and it doesn't seem like I'm making good on what I've been told to do. No, it doesn't look like I'm making good on it, but ha. All right, I'm not doing well, so maybe somebody else will help me come and help me do better. But I just want to quickly thank all of you for being here this morning. Hopefully we have recruited you into the coalition and the army that is going to fight for what's right, fight for all of us. We want to make sure that you have more information about the true cost of living. We're trying to pull up a QR code for you to scan. If we can't, just make sure you visit nationaltruecostofliving.org. As we wrap, I want to thank again the new school and the center here. I want to thank Kristen Morris and her team. I want to thank Derek Hamilton and his team. I want to thank President Tower. I want to thank the panelists who helped to bring to life, to help us to appreciate what the experience is like and how it impacts, what the lived experience is for many New Yorkers as they struggle to achieve economic security, and how essentially our plight, when I say our plight, I mean our trajectory, the challenges that beset us, how there's so many structural economic underpinnings attendant to that, and how the system served to work against us. And if we do not cast a vision centered in humanity, in freedom, and in agency, all tied to economic security, we're not as a nation, as a society, going to get ahead. So thank you all. And again, to find out more about the true cost of living activities, reach out by going to nationaltruecostofliving.org. And one last thing, I've been fortunate to have some conversations with people at the state and the local level. And I think one thing that you all can do is help our mayor-elect, as well as our sitting governor, as well as our federal House minority leader and minority leader in the House and the Senate understand they all better work together to advance opportunity and security for everyone. This is not a time when any one of them can put up roadblocks and not be held accountable. And the only way that they will understand that they have to work in partnership, is if you all remind them. Thank you. Have a good afternoon.